Pizzeria, twillmn.com, Twill on Instagram.
And Jim, let me just, after that little kind of mini Russo rant that I just said, I don't want to make people think that I'm like campaigning for Don Waddell or that he is the lone candidate or the front runner right now. I think Bill Guerin is absolutely a viable candidate for this job. And I do think Ron Hextall is a viable candidate for this job. And I think people like Scott Mellenby as well. I can't remember in my first Russo rant if I mentioned Brian Lawton, but I think he'll wind up being a candidate for this job. But to me right now, what I'm hearing when I make my list, I can see it being kind of Mellenby versus Guerin, maybe with Fitzy in there late, and Waddell versus Hextall. That's just, sort of where I'm at right now. Unless there's a secret candidate, which sometimes there are. I don't know if you remember, but when I was at the Star Tribune, it was a year into Chuck Fletcher's tenure when I finally figured out who the real second finalist was for that job. And I went public with it and actually quoted the candidate, and that was Steve Yzerman. And it was fascinating. In 2009, when Doug Risebrough was fired and Craig Leopold went up through his search, it got down to Yzerman versus Chuck Fletcher. And Craig really wanted to hire Yzerman. It was the 2009-10 season. And Yzerman felt like being a rookie GM of the Minnesota Wild would be extremely difficult navigating being a rookie GM of Team Canada for Vancouver for the Olympics. And so he turned down the job. Before Craig Leopold offered the job officially to Chuck Fletcher, Craig Leopold couldn't sleep one night. And he calls up Yzerman and he goes, "Can I fly to you and just meet with you in Detroit and let's just discuss this?" And he actually flew to Detroit, to Bloomfield Hills where Steve Yzerman lived, I believe, met with Yzerman. They met for like several hours. And at the end of the meeting, Yzerman just felt like it wasn't the right thing to do to Team Canada or the Minnesota Wild to take the job. And so he turned down the job. Chuck Fletcher was hired. The next year, Brian Lawton was fired in Tampa Bay, and Yzerman became the rookie GM of the Tampa Bay Lightning. And it's just, if it was 1 year earlier, I mean, it's just so funny the way it works. I mean, it's, in 2008, Craig Leopold came in to own the Minnesota Wild. He had every right to fire his GM, but they had just won the division. They won their only division title in franchise history, the Northwest Division. So you're not firing Doug Risebrough then, but if he fires Risebrough then, Yzerman might have been the GM. If he decided to fire Doug Risebrough 1 year later than he did, Steve Yzerman probably would have been the GM of the Wild the last several years. Isn't it crazy? I mean, all the way timing works. And, it's sort of at that situation now where all of a sudden you have a crop of candidates that are available that were not available last year. Ron Hextall was not available last year. People like that. Don Waddell would nobody even thought that Don Waddell should be a candidate a year ago, but now all of a sudden a year later, he's a GM of the year finalist. He makes some really, really good moves. Everything he touched turned to gold in Carolina, and he kind of resurrects his reputation as a manager. And now all of a sudden he's potentially a front runner for this job. It is always crazy timing and the way things work.
Oh, absolutely. Great stuff. And we are going to get to Twitter questions. I do want to thank Fixology Repair, fixologyrepair.com. They now have a new location downtown in the St. Paul Skyway, not far from the Wild offices. And they handle, it's in the Wells Fargo Place in downtown St. Paul. Staff with professionally trained expert jewelers that provide a full range of exceptional jewelry repair, refinishing, and refurbishment services. They do cleaning and polishing, ring sizing, stone matching, necklace repair, bracelet repair, pearl and bead restringing, sterling silver repair. They have a Fixology battery warranty program. And they got everything. And they do all the iPhone, iPad, cell phone, tablet repair. Check out fixologyrepair.com. Go to the location and check out the new location in St. Paul. They also have the place in downtown Minneapolis in the Skyway, and of course the big store out at the Mall of America, third floor by Nordstrom's. Fixologyrepair.com. All right, to go to Twitter questions from Kip. Who are the best UFA signings in Wild history? My list is Rolston, Parisi, and Suter.
Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely go with there. I think Ralston, to me, Suter and Parisi are interesting because obviously you knew at that time when they signed 13-year deals that there was going to come a point where it'd be like, oh my God, not just for the Wild, by the way, but for them maybe. And we're seeing that, I think, right now with Zach Parisi. It'd be funny to go back and ask Zach Parisi right now, like, hey, what advice would you give to a 27-year-old free agent named Zach Parisi? He'd probably tell you sign a shorter-term deal. So it's not just from a Wild perspective. But to me, Brian Ralston, 3 years, 30 goals each year. To me, at the price that they paid him, which was I think 2.5 or something ridiculous at that time. I still look at Brian Ralston as kind of being one of the best free agent signings. And then it depends how you term free agent. Technically, Jared Spurgeon was a free agent signing. And so if you want to include a junior free agent, Jared Spurgeon's got to be in probably the top 4 as well.
From Alex Gaylor or Gellert.
Can I tell you one other that just popped in my head that I know Wild fans probably might roll their eyes on? But Nicholas Backstrom, he was the first European free agent, I believe, in NHL history. And because there was a time where you could actually draft like a 27. I remember we were in Florida once, and I think the Panthers drafted Yaroslav Spacek at age like 25 or 26. There used to be, to get Euros, you actually had to draft them type thing. I think when they made Europeans allowed to be free agents, I'm pretty sure Backstrom was the first one ever. And you look at Backstrom right now, I'm on Hockey Reference, and Backstrom still to this day, might change one day, is the all-time leading wins leader for the Minnesota Wild. I mean, so obviously, you could say, I think a lot of people, the lasting memories sometimes are the way that the careers finish, and obviously Backstrom struggled down the stretch here. Right now he has more wins than in anybody in NHL history or in Wild history. And that better change this year, because if it doesn't change this year, by the way, the Wild are going to have an absolutely horrific season. But the only reason why I say that is Devin Dubnyk's 29 wins behind him. And if Devin Dubnyk doesn't get to 30 wins this year, Wild might be looking at a lottery pick. So. Yeah.
Hey, we also want to thank Tony Hoaglund, Hoaglund. He works out of Champlin. You can work with him wherever you live in the metro area or in Minnesota. Michael and I both live pretty far from Champlin. We still have Tony as our insurance agent, and he's done a great job for us.
Hey, Minnesota sports fans. This is your local State Farm agent, Tony Hoaglund. I need you all to ask yourselves this question. If you're in an at-fault car accident and you are sued for $700,000, how much of that $700,000 will my current insurance company pay? If you are unsure or can't answer all $700,000, you need to give us a call. State Farm has been number 1 in car insurance since World War II and number 1 in homeowners insurance since 1964. For a no-obligation review of your current policies, call us at 763-421-4900 or check out our website at www.champlininsurance.com.
Also from Alex, which one of the younger guys do you think takes the biggest step forward this season?
I think Cunnin. It'll be interesting. Things have now suddenly changed. I mean, if Alex asked this question last Monday when Paul Fenton was still the GM, I would say probably Fiala or Donato, because I think that their pressure when you have a GM that acquires 2 players is that he's going to dictate to the coach ice time on those guys. Now suddenly you don't have that pressure above you, and now maybe Luke Cunnin would get significantly bigger role on this team in a higher position. And so Cunnin's one guy. I don't know. I think the world of that kid. This guy, the one thing that I don't know if you read between the lines of my Fenton piece last week, but Luke Cunnin at the All-Star break was not expecting to go to the minors. Okay. And this is again, back to the mismanagement of Paul Fenton. Luke Cunnin had plans during the All-Star break. Now it's perfectly reasonable that a GM would say after the season, I want my group, my 2-way contracted guys to get experience in the minors and play there. It's reasonable even at the All-Star break to say, you know what, these guys are going down to the minors and they're going to play. But if you're going to do that, you should communicate that to the player 2-3 weeks before. These guys were blindsided. They had an All-Star game. Both Eriksson Ek and Cunnin had All-Star game and bye-week plans and had to cancel it the day before. Not only that, Luke Cunnin, I alluded to it at the time, was playing on a lower body injury. He was playing on a broken foot. He could barely walk after that last game in Denver. And the next day he's in Iowa and he's just playing, no big deal. I mean, that to me is a sign, and then last summer, ACL recovery the entire summer, doesn't get his summer basically. And after the season, he's told to go to the minors with Donato and Greenway. He's not happy about it. But you know what he does? He goes down there and scores 9 freaking goals. This guy is captain material. And so I don't know. I just think the world of that kid. And so, look, Fiala and Donato better have big years. I think Donato, from a character standpoint, is as good a person as I've, so far from what I've seen, is just a great dude. And I think that he's got a lot of assets in his toolbox that he's going to have to, continue to excel at. And then there's going to be definitely warts in his game, defensively especially, that he's going to have to, improve. And then Fiala's got to, kind of continue to be a guy that's got to excel and break through here, because the Wild are obviously gave up a huge asset for him. So I think those guys have a chance to get to that point that Alex is asking. But to me, I'd put those two right on par with Luke Kunin, because right now, suddenly, with Paul Fenton not here, I think it changes probably what the allotment of ice times and responsibilities will be on this team a bit.
Interesting. From Kellen Johnson, are the interviews and conversations with Pierre Maguire legit for the GM position, or possibly more around insights into locker room morale?
Yeah, I think probably a little bit of both. I don't know if I mentioned earlier in the podcast that Pierre Maguire is probably going to get talked to.
Yeah, you did.
I think I mentioned on Spit and Chicklets yesterday. I just, from what I'm hearing through the grapevine, through league sources, I do think that Pierre Maguire is at a minimum going to be able to get in front of the Wild and talk about this team and his desire to be a general manager in this team. I always joke with Pierre every time I see him. It's like, he wants to be a GM, but it's like, I always say, Pierre, you're going to have to take a big pay cut to do that, because, he's the busiest guy in TV right now. He is. I mean, this year, remember what he was doing? He was going between every Western Conference game, and it's just crazy how much he travels. And, I'm sure the money that he makes working for NBC. So if he's the Wild GM, he might have to take a bit of a pay cut.
From Benjamin Hurtle, the disconnected locker room referenced earlier in the offseason between players, was that due to Fenton, or was there more going on?
Oh, no, yeah. I mean, that was not Fenton's fault. I mean, I think you need a leader to get in there and work with these guys, and they're trying to, and it's a big part of the interview process. Trust me, I've heard through the grapevine that a huge part of the interview process is Craig Leopold's really concern about the locker room right now and it being fractured and in a bit of disarray. And he's going to want a leader that's going to go in there and deal with a lot of personalities and try to fix it. And I think that it could happen, but that absolutely, preceded Paul Fenton's arrival.
Kevin Gustafson, besides bringing Modano, what other steps are they taking to assure they aren't hiring another Fenton? You might have already addressed that. Is there anything other aspect of that answer you'd like to provide?
Well, I just think a lot of due diligence, a lot of talking to several people. I think with Paul Fenton, they relied on a couple people that Craig Leopold really, really trusted, that I think he feels stung by, quite frankly, and maybe led down the wrong path. And I think that they're just going to be a lot more diligent this time around, where the word due diligence comes from, and to really behind the scenes here do a lot of that work. I know Mike Modano is doing it. I believe that Matt Maka, again, Craig is out of town here until I don't really know exactly. I think next Tuesday. So I think behind the scenes right now, there's going to be some phone interviews with Matt Maka and Mike Modano with a couple of people, but I think a lot of the work behind the scenes is Maka and Modano really sit down and make a quality decision here going forward.
From NH, how come Dumba and Boudreau seem to be the only ones on the team who have the us against the world mentality going into the season? First of all, is that an accurate assessment? And if so, why?
Yeah, I got to be completely honest. I don't know what you mean.
I don't get that one.
Yeah. So, maybe just to explain what you mean. I'm not kind of comprehending their, exactly what that question means.
Let's see. For Johnson from Wisconsin, who's become a regular, does the new GM mean that Bruce Boudreau could be extended, or are we looking at a bring in his own guy scenario again?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. It's like I know that Bruce would love an extension. I do think that sometimes it'd be really good to at least give a coach a 1-year extension, if for no other reason than the perception inside the locker room and with the media. Because, if the Wild struggle out of the gate, it just is a topic. It's a topic that is an immediate elephant in the room when you know that the GM or the coach for a team is in the last year of his contract. And so, I just think it's maybe a smart thing. But look, any GM eventually is going to want to bring in his own guy. And so that's the reason why it would not shock me, unless the new GM has some incredible relationship that is preemptive to here in Minnesota, with Bruce Boudreau that most likely he's going to have to work the final year of his contract, because it just is, from a GM standpoint, if you're not allowed to immediately fire the coach, you usually don't want to give